Hey, good morning to everybody joining me today. We're going to get into this conversation because a lot of controversy has been going on, especially when conversations come about Gen Z young men and much of the scolding and the criticism that they're receiving without any equal or balanced opinion. And I understand why they do it. Obviously, we live in a gynocentric environment. It's a gynocracy. Women do a large percent of the spending. But it really goes deeper than that. And it really shows how entrenched, how indoctrinated the greatest society is, especially here in the West, of feminist ideology. Even to the conservatives themselves, they have to admit that they've been infiltrated and influenced heavily by feminist ideology. And even the church itself caters and basically panders to women in a way that's just become disturbing now. So now they're using Gen Z young men as punching bags. Now Gen Z young men have become the punching bags of the country. And it's a damn shame. Even some YouTube content creators, first of all, these young men have only been around since 1996, 1997 for Gen Z. Salute to you, Red Pill Science. Salute to you. They've only been around since 1997. And yet they're the punching bag for all of society's ills. Even some of these content creators make me sick, especially the one who come online, disrespect men. But at the same time they're disrespecting the men, they're begging for super chats. They're begging for cash apps from the very same men that they're disrespecting. You're begging for super chats and cash apps from the very same men that you're disrespecting. It makes no sense to me. And many of them come into these spaces and they beat on their chests. Look how manly I am. Look how great I am. I'm a better man than you. I have millions of dollars in the bank and I drive a fancy car. But then you have $1 million in the bank and you drive a fancy car, but you're on the internet begging men for support. You're begging men for support. That means that you're a freaking grifter and you're a fraud ass dude and you're probably a closet loser. You are a loser because your whole life and your whole mindset, your mentality is based around materialism. That's how you get your rocks off. What we have is so many grifters on YouTube, so many closet simps, so many scammers, so many guys that are full of shit. It's almost sickening. The moment they come on YouTube and start peacocking about their wealth is the moment that they lose credibility, in my opinion. Because there ain't no man, that's about any substance. It really has time to be worried about flexing freaking material things like cars and all that metal shit. Quality of life and good living, hell yeah. But again, that shouldn't be a man's identity and only purpose in life. Don't get me wrong. Those are good things to have. Achievement is an excellent goal. Being wealthy is an excellent goal. And a man should strive to be successful. But the idea of coming on the internet and flexing to other men, there's something freaking wrong with you. You obviously have a deficit of low self-esteem. And you're trying to project high levels of confidence, but they're not. Most of these guys are, their self-esteem is about as strong as wet toilet paper. And you see them all the time because all they do is beat on their chest all day long. But I digress from that conversation. But I have to, it's a sad day. It's a cold day when I have to say I agree with Matt Walsh. Because I think a lot of times when I see that a lot of these conservatives have been rolling men under the bus, and obviously for good reason, because women spend money. Women spend money in the church. Women fill up the offering pot. Women do the majority of the spending, and we understand the consumer market. Even some of these men that I have no beef with them, their channel, you can tell that they're pandering to women because they kind of try and be equal and fair and balanced in the middle when they know they know things are not fair and balanced. They know it's very lopsided, these content creators, but they understand the 80% market. Like if they see a guy like Derek Jackson, who has what, over 5 million plus subscribers on his Facebook because he panders to women all day long, a guy will say, oh man, this is the way I make money. And pandering to women makes a hell of a lot of money. Let's be honest, guys. If I switch my channel to become a pander there, I mean, I know the views would go up. You just have to tell women what they want to hear. And you will make money. Your soul would probably burn in hell because you just destroyed their lives, but you would make a lot of money. And everybody knows this. So that's why they play this game of lying to women, lying or telling half truths, because it's a grift. Everybody knows it. It's what it is. And that's how generally things are set up. But I saw this, this clip with Matt Walsh, and I wanted to play it because it's interesting because they're about to do to young men. Remember what the Democrats did to young men, where they alienated young men. Well, the right is about to do that to young men as well. Maybe these young men will start becoming registered independents, which I think we all should do is register independents, because the system itself, you can see that sometimes people are, that sword with two edges. Either way you go, you have situations where people have been compromised, especially when you're dealing with the fact that corporations basically, and rich corporations basically run everything. You're dealing with the Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, and liberal, especially at the elite level, the two sides of the same coin. Many people just pick the lesser of the two evils. Salute to you, Sergeant. So we understand the bullshittery that goes on. We understand the gaslight that goes on. We understand the manipulation, that goes on. And it's a bunch of foolishness that goes on. So guys, make sure you guys hit the like button. We're going to get into this conversation because I want to address what Matt Walsh said, because obviously everybody has found the Gen Z punching bag. Beat up on Gen Z, beat up on Gen Z. That's the ultimate go-to. Now, they love it because it's like, oh, get those men, everything men. And the question becomes, we never ask the question fundamentally, are they just a reaction to a bigger social problem that exists within society? The side effects of feminism, government empowerment, and a system that's designed to make men more feminine, to beat them up psychologically and mentally, to turn them into these droids of servitude. He said, we're conservative, but the red pill allows us to see the simp Republicans posing as conservatives, but are really feminists. Very true. Very true. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of, we have the religious people in the churches. The churches have turned into a profit motive now with the women, especially. See, the great thing about Christianity is that and all you have to do is repent and feel forgiven. That's why so many women love Christianity. They go into church. You could be a 304 for all your life, and then wake up tomorrow, all of a sudden you repent of your sins, and now you're a virtuous, conservative, religious woman. Jesus has cleansed me of all that heavy and vicious and vigorous pounding that I received over the years from these men. Now I'm cleansed, and now I want a conservative man, that provider man, that's going to pay 100% of my bills, neglecting the fact that I have about 100 bodies on me, probably had a bunch of abortions, and maybe some of them even with other men's kids. So that's the new grift right now, rebranding, the new celibacy movement. What they call it, the whole phase reset, as they would call it in these spaces. It's a sick game that's being played out here, And I see a lot of these guys, even the guys that I know, are starting to pander towards women because they're jealous of Derek Jackson. They're jealous of these panda bear. Derek Jackson is just a businessman. You know, he sells emotional prawn. But these guys get jealous of guys like Derek Jackson, and they try to pander to make their channels big like those guys. And just, even though it destroys women, even though those guys are the worst destroyers of a community, because they validate female delusion. And it gets really deep. It gets deep, you know. And it's good that we have objective channels, objective media where we can just make our own decisions. I just put it on the table. But let's get into what Matt Walsh say. Let's hit the like button, guys. I want to really delve deep into this, but I have to do a make sure I put this fair use thing up here, because again, guys, hit the like button. We'll move the content. So Matt Walsh, I have to give him credit for this. Matt Walsh, sometimes I disagree with him, but overall, I have to give this man credit. He has no problem taking on the difficult topics, whatever. Fact is fact, regardless of feeling. Let me get that fair use ban up here. Right. Let's continue on. Let me put his channel up here, show him that respect. I want to make sure we give the man credit for his content. Matt Walsh. So here we have Tomi Lahren, the covert feminist that she is on the Laura Ingraham show, obviously doing her usual spill. But let's get, where you go. Fair use. Again, let's see what happens.
Men are human beings. They're not robots. They're not machines programmed to do the bidding of their female operator. Men are human. They have their own dreams and goals and desires. That's okay. They're allowed to be people. For our daily cancellation today, we
fair use. Let's continue on.
We turn to a segment on Laura Ingraham's show featuring conservative commentator Tomi Lahren. A clip from this segment went viral over the weekend, with Tomi doling out some tough talk for young men who she says are lazy and feminized. Tomi has been on this subject for a long time, and we'll have more on that in a minute. But let's start with this most recent segment. Here it is. Listen.
It's a major problem. And, you know, Speaker Johnson has been talking about those maybe deadbeat folks that are on Medicaid, and maybe some of those folks are the stay-at-home sons. We don't know. But I'll tell you this, leave it to Gen Z to rebrand laziness and social awkwardness as something cutesy, like a stay-at-home son. They did much the same thing with quiet quitting, where you can go to work and do less. And if you call it quiet quitting, it's somehow better. But Laura, I got to tell you, this is also a big problem when it comes to, I think, declining birth rates, people not getting married and having children. You know, that's a big problem. They blame it on women. Well, look at what young women have to choose from. The pickings are slim. Yes, we might have a feminism problem in America, but it's the feminization of men. There are a lot of young women out there that want to get married. They want to have kids. They want to have stable families. But there are a lot of young men out there who want to live in mama's basement and order DoorDash. And therein lies a big part of the problem.
So Tomi,
you heard. Sorry, guys, I had to stop for a second in this reaction video. You heard that diatribe of pure garbage, basically. And Laura Ingraham knows better. She knows better. She knows that's garbage she's saying. But again, that's the narrative that sells, because it's easy in a gynocentric or gynocracy to really put all the blame and really go after men. But again, let's continue on. We're here to hear let's hear what he has to say. Fair use.
Blames young men for the declining birth rates, saying that women want to get married and have children, but men would rather stay in mama's basement and order DoorDash. It's an interesting accusation coming from a 32-year-old woman who, as far as I know, doesn't have children. Her Wikipedia article at least mentions a chihuahua, but no human children. But in any case, Tomi, as I mentioned earlier, has been on this subject for a long time. She's spent the last several years blasting men for their incompetence and their insufficiency. In fact, the last time she was featured on the Daily Cancellation was 5 whole years ago when she said this.
Now, I've often talked about the vacation of America and how men are no longer men. I talk to my mom about this a lot, and she says, well, maybe it's just the guys in Texas. Maybe it's just the guys in Los Angeles. It is not just the guys in Los Angeles, Nashville, Dallas, and they're not any better in the Midwest. Quite frankly, I think they're trash all over this country in the age range of about 20 to I think about 55, maybe even 60. A lot of men are trash. A lot of men don't know how to treat women. A lot of men don't know how to really, quite frankly, pull their heads out of the sand and pay attention.
A lot of men are trash, she said 5 years ago. Men are trash all over this country, was her exact quote. And that's the kind of statement that if I said that about women, I would be denounced by both sides as a radical misogynist and likely domestic abuser. It's the kind of statement that you cannot say about any broad demographic except men. I mean, imagine saying, women are trash all over the country, or gays are trash all over the country, or black people are trash all over the country. Those are unacceptable statements in polite society.
He's totally right. Fair use. Let's continue.
But a lot of men are trash all across the country, is commentary so acceptable and normalized that we hear it even from pundits on the right. But let's go back to what Tommy said not 5 years ago, but 5 days ago on Laura Ingram's show. Again, she said, quote, young women want families. Too many young men want DoorDash and mama's basement. Now let's leave aside how insulting and dismissive this statement is. The much greater problem is that it's just simply inaccurate. In fact, polls have consistently shown for years now that young men are significantly more likely to desire family life than young women. There are more young men who want to start families than there are young women who want to start families. And these are not like the findings of Andrew Tate or the red pill YouTuber, but of research firms like the Pew Research Center. Okay. In other words, these are findings from organizations that are don't have an anti-feminist bias. Let's put it that way. And according to a recent Pew study, 57.
He's right, but let him get into the stats. I just have to stop every once in a while, guys. I apologize. Continue.
7% of men between the ages of 18 and 34 want to be parents someday. For women in the same age bracket, the number is only 45%. So yes, less than half of young women want to be mothers, as opposed to nearly 60% of young men who want to be fathers.
So it's 57% versus 60%.
Fathers. And this is not just Pew Research Center claiming this. Multiple polls over the past 2 decades and across the world have found that young men are more likely to want children than young women. There was even a poll done in Nigeria a couple of years ago that found the same kind of gender gap. So this is a very consistent finding, which means that there just isn't any evidence to support Tommy's claim. In fact, the data tells us that it's young women who, more often, would prefer DoorDash and mama's basement. And it's not just that women don't want kids. Reading now from a New York Post report from April, quote, women have certainly come a long way, no longer feeling the need to put a ring on it due to social or cultural pressures. It turns out U.S. women are ditching the traditional idea of marriage and instead choosing to live their best single lives. And the proof is in the data. According to a 2023 Pew Research survey, almost half of U.S. women didn't view marriage as an important element of a fulfilling life. The percentage of women looking for romance is on a steep decline. According to a 2022 Pew survey, only 34% of single gals were looking for a serious romantic relationship, which is down from 38% in a 2019 survey. So not only...
Right. Statistically, I have to stop for a second, guys. But this is not just... it's just global. Look at what's going on in China. I'm going to address the issues of China later, but China has even taken on this feminist ideology through the CCP. They've brought this into their culture to stimulate more spending and support the economy so that the CCP can build their military might and try and rule the world. So they indoctrinated feminism into their own culture in China. So it's not just America, it's also global. So we see this right now. And the motive is purely spending. Spending is the motive. But let's continue on.
Not only are a majority of young women not looking to start families, the majority aren't looking for any kind of serious romantic relationship at all. That's what basically all of the studies and surveys tell us. Now, I'll be the first to say that most studies are fake, But in this case, they also line up with our anecdotal observations. For example, social media is full of videos of young women glamorizing single life. And this is a whole genre of videos that we've played and talked about many times on the show. Here's just one recent example.
I never ended up with a good guy until I figured out how to truly love being single and doing things alone. I don't think we give enough credit to single women who love being single because there's still the whole childless cat lady trope out there. Like, you can enjoy life alone. You don't need somebody to bear witness to your joy to make it exist.
Well, actually, I have to tell you, you can't really enjoy life alone. You can't. You do need someone to bear witness to your joy to make it exist. Happiness is only real when shared, in the words of Christopher McCandless moments before he died alone in the Alaskan wilderness. If it were possible to be happy completely alone, then it would be possible to find people in solitary confinement who live in a state of total bliss. It'd be possible to be stranded on a deserted island alone for 10 years and actually enjoy the experience. But almost no human would or ever has found joy in such a state. And that's because we are human beings. We're not trees or spiders. We desire companionship, which is why these single women who are happy alone actually spend their whole lives searching for a way to replace the companionship of a man.
And again, once again, I'm sorry I have to stop, guys, because I'll continue the video as much as I can, but you know, there's certain copyright things I have to consider. But anyhow, this alone thing, no human, we're a social animal. Most of these women that have neglected certain traditional lifestyle with family and community, I'll be honest with you, even from somebody who's worked in law enforcement, a lot of these women are heavily on medication. You'll be surprised who's taking medications these days. Not that I'm anti, if you need meds to control your mental health, the therapy business is huge. And women are some of the major consumers of this, of therapy, because again, they're going against their own nature to fit in with a modern society, and it's creating mental illness and problems. But let's continue on.
That's why these single women still have one-night stands. It's why they become obsessed with their pets. It's why they go on podcasts to talk about how happy they are. It's why they post about it on social media. They are looking for human connection and validation and companionship in other forms, some form that will sufficiently replace the form of a man who loves them and is devoted to them. And they never find it. And so they are never really happy, no matter how desperately they claim otherwise. Now, women aren't the only ones giving up on marriage and family life, but they are giving up on it more often and in greater numbers. In fact, there is a distinct difference even between the young men who have given up on family life and the young women who have given up on family life. Like, even when you compare those two groups, the men and women who both say that they're not going to get married or have kids, there's still a difference. And the difference is this. The young men usually have given up on the idea of having a family despairingly because they think it's not an attainable goal. The young women give up on it happily because they think being childless is a path to personal empowerment and freedom. Privacy has become a luxury in this country, and that's honestly pretty messed up, because here's
the women see it as empowerment. The men see it as, look, the option are terrible. The men are reacting from a disastrous dating and relationship market where they have no choice but to adapt because of the side effects of feminism and what it has done to women, especially sexual liberation. So one is in it and see that being single and being alone is empowerment. The other one is like, hey, look, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. You've created an environment where traditional life or whatever else seems either unattainable or just too toxic and too much of a liability and then men are practicing risk mitigation because like the juice ain't worth the squeeze. So one is a reaction based on what has been dealt to them. The other one is trying to achieve a made up goal of, independence and freedom. So let's continue on. Let me get past this.
Agencies and big tech are left empty-handed. Here's the crazy part. In just the last year, ExpressVPN to mine and get their privacy back. However, almost none of them are happy about it. ExpressVPN, that's expressvpn.com/Walsh. Now, in my pretty extensive experience talking to young men who plan to be alone and single forever, almost none of them are happy about it. I don't think I've ever heard any of them claim that they're empowered by this decision. They have resigned themselves to the fate because they believe, wrongly in my opinion, that they have no hope of ever winning the affection of a young woman who will love them and stay loyal to them for life. I have no doubt that some young women have also given up on dating out of a similar sense of despair and hopelessness, but it seems much more common that they'll cast their decision as empowering and objectively good in and of itself. In other words, a man gives up on getting married and having kids because he feels like he has no choice. A woman gives up on it because she feels that giving up on it is the best choice. And I think both are wrong, but one is wrong for a worse reason. But this isn't just about pointing fingers and establishing who is more to blame for the problem. The point isn't even what Tommy said. It's what she didn't say and never says. It's what almost no conservative female pundit in the mainstream will say.
And that's where we're going to land. That's where he's going to land this plane. It's not about what they say. It's about what they don't say. Right? They don't talk about the causation. Let's continue on.
Now, we've heard all of them scold young men. We've heard their tough talk and supposed tough love targeted at young men. We've heard that for years. Well, my question is, when will they start directing even an ounce of that criticism and that toughness towards young women? I call young men out on this show all the time. I challenge young men to work harder, to improve themselves, to toughen up all the time. I talk about that all the time. Just ask a lot of the red pill YouTuber guys who don't like me for that reason. So I'm not afraid to do that. But why won't Tommy do the same for young women? Why won't any of these female pundits do that? Why don't we ever hear this kind of tough talk about, these women, they're just lazy. All they want to do is sit around. We never hear that from women about women. If women, they will only say it about men. Why won't they challenge young women to live up to their obligations? In fact, when pressed, Tommy won't admit that young women have any obligations at all in the first place. I want you to listen to this exchange on Piers Morgan between Andrew Wilson and Tommy Lahren. This was a couple of months ago. I thought it was a very revealing exchange. Let's watch it.
Yeah, we're going to get into the exchange. I just had to stop this quick stop. Okay, we're going to get into this exchange. Let's go ahead and play it.
Women on the right, covert feminists on the right, are constantly and consistently talking about how they need to have privilege in society. I want men. Their version of masculinity is men who take care of us, men who protect us, men who do all of this. Those are all duties that men have towards women. Great. What are the duties that women have towards men? What are the duties that women have towards anything? What do men get out of this arrangement? What are we getting out of this arrangement? Can you tell me?
I mean,
I would argue that men innately should be protectors and providers.
Hang on one second. Let Tommy respond.
Most men are born that way.
Let Tommy respond to that, and then I'll come to you, Jez. And then Sean, you've been waiting patiently. So
most men are born to be protectors and providers. I can't imagine my dad saying, you know what, to my mom, you know what, I'm not going to be a protector and a provider unless you do this. That's not how real men operate. Real men are protectors and providers, and they marry women who hopefully have some virtue, but also bring a lot to the table as well, that are great mothers, great wives, caretakers of the home. There's nothing wrong with being a traditional wife and mother. you're misunderstanding me if you think that I think that women should just be out doing whatever they want. I think that there are gender roles that should be respected. But I don't think a man needs to get something out of it to be a manly man, a protector, and a provider. If you think you need to get something out of it, I quite frankly don't consider you a real man.
Now, Andrew asked a very reasonable, important question. What are the duties that women have towards men? Tommy, who talks a lot about the duties men have towards women, could not list even one duty that goes the other way. She says men have the duty to be protectors and providers. I agree, by the way. I say that all the time. You're not going to find anyone who agrees more with that, or you're going to find very few conservative pundit types who, I can't believe I just called myself a pundit, who talk about that more often. But okay, so men, that's the obligation that men have to women. What obligations do women have to men? She could not provide even one obligation that women have towards men.
And not only that, in today's society, if you try to talk about the obligations that women have towards men, you would be called and labeled a misogynist. They will tell you that you hate women, or or you're broke, or you're degenerate. And that whole clip, she tries to define what manhood and masculinity is. And she went straight to feminist shaming language, which is, if you push these closet feminists or any of these simps to the corner, they usually reveal them. When you see the soy boy over there on the panel to her right, I mean, those are the type of men that, a feminized society has created. Those guys in wartime that would be absolutely useless. It's pathetic, but let's continue on.
Instead, she says that a man who expects to get something out of a relationship with a woman is not a real man, which means that in Tommy's world, no man in history has ever been a real man, because of course, every man hopes to get something out of his relationship with a woman. Men are human beings. They're not robots. They're not machines programmed to do the bidding of their female operators. Men are human. They have their own dreams and goals and desires. That's okay. They're allowed to be people, aren't they? In fact, women who are in relationships should want that. Like, I can't imagine how it would make my wife feel if I said, I don't really get anything out of this. It's not for me, though. I don't get anything out of this. That's insane. That's an insane attitude. Of course I should get something out of my relationship with my wife, and she should get something out of it too. If either of us can look at it and say, we're not getting anything out of this, then something has gone massively wrong here. The fact that it's apparently shameful for a man to want anything out of a relationship at all, the fact that he could be shamed for expecting anything out of his girlfriend or wife at all of any kind, should tell you everything you need to know. The fact that he is supposed to have only obligations that go one way in the relationship and there's none that go back the other way, that should tell you something. And most of all, it tells you that feminism has seeped into the very core of our culture so deeply and so thoroughly that many conservatives harbor radically, insanely feminist beliefs without even knowing it. So this is my challenge to people like Tommy. You've lectured men enough. We've all heard the speech. Some of what you say about men has a degree of validity. Some is kind of bitter and resentful and doesn't have a lot of value. But what would have a lot of value is if you would just once deliver one of these harsh, no-nonsense speeches to the statistical majority of young women who have no desire to have children and become mothers and do their part to continue the human race. A lot of young women have never been told by anyone that they have any obligations or responsibilities of any kind. The very concept of responsibility is foreign to them. Certainly the concept of having responsibilities to men is not only foreign to a lot of young women, but anathema.
She'll never do it. Sorry, Matt, but none of them will ever do it. One, she will go against the sisterhood. Two, they will crucify her in the media. The women will come for her. They will isolate her, alienate her, and they will punish her. So she'll never, ever go and put commentary towards women. because it's just not going to happen in a gynocracy. They will come for her, and she knows it. That's why she finds it easy to come out here and grift and come at men. But let's continue on.
Okay. There is not a young man who exists in the country who has not been told many times about the obligations he has to women. But there are many young women, millions, I mean, almost all of them have never been told ever that they have any obligations to men. I mean, if they were told that, it would be like, it's heresy. It's blasphemy against what Katy Perry would call the divine feminine. I still don't know what that is, but, you know, I guess it's blasphemy against that. Now, I don't know if those young women are eating DoorDash or not. I don't know if they live in their mother's basement or if they live somewhere else, but I do know that they exist. And there's a lot of them. And in fact, Tommy, it seems, is one of them. So I think she should focus on fixing that problem before she tries to fix men. And that is why Tommy Lahren is today, sadly, canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access.
And I totally agree. So really, they want men to be crash dummies, crash test dummies, walking around, just crash test dummy, just sacrificial, no expectation, no demands, no requirements. And then when they don't get what they want, which is what they're not getting out of Gen Z, they're going to just continue to bash them and attack them. Even some of these, don't get me wrong, I don't support any young man not being the best version of himself for him. But they're attacking young men because they don't want to be, they want them to be the type of cog in the wheel for the system that they want and give them the type of no rewards in terms of any expectations that they should have from society itself. Basically, you're just a sacrificial animal. And that's really what it comes down to. So let me remove that from the screen. So therein lies the problem. And we're going to talk about covert feminism. Remove that from here, because that's what we see now. And the rebranding movement that we see that's going on in society and the shame. Because I'll tell you another covert feminism. Sadiya Khan is another one that I find to be quite interesting, right? And I think the brother Psych Hacks really, he did a video. I have to give him 24 hours before. Let me make sure I hit the like button. Dr. Ryan Terabin did a series because he was just on a podcast with we're going to get into this video right here. And he's going to talk about delusion. You know, hey, what's up, man? My brother, salute to you, brother Wayne. Salute to you as well. Hey, guys, hit the like button. If you want to support the channel, you can cash at me at $the Peaceful Life 23 if you want to support the channel. Unlike these red pill or some of these content creators who come online and talk trash to you, then ask you for support of the channel. Me, I just ask you for support of the channel. At the end of the day, let's keep independent, free-thinking men's content going. All right, you know what I mean? Like that always gets me, right? Like a guy will come online, right, and he'll talk about what losers the men are. Then he asks them for money. What kind of crap is that? You know, if they're such losers, why are you asking them for money? Right? If they're such losers, why are you asking them for money in support of your channel? I always laugh my ass off. That's funny as hell, man. But anyhow, let's move it right along. And again, another one of these grifters. I see a lot of women sometimes come into men's spaces because they know that you got a bunch of horny dudes that's going to sit around And they're going to enjoy a woman saying what men can't say, especially if the woman is easy on the eyes. Sadea Khan is one of those. Wherever she is in Dubai or whatever else, but they don't really even acknowledge the fact that a lot of them are just feminists. But let's continue on. But Psych Hacks actually, my brother, Dr. Ryan Terabin, he addresses the point of what social media now has created so much delusion, where I think the dating market has become men versus mental illness. We have an epidemic of mental illness right now. The delusion has gone so far that women are literally living on a different planet than men right now. And that's where the delusion comes in. Not all women, but a majority of them, especially when they get the validation that comes from the panda bears, the simps, the media, the social structure in general validates a lot of delusion, because pushing back against women automatically labels you either misogynist. If you're a woman, you'll be labeled a pick me, or they will accuse a woman of having internalized misogyny. So there's really not much pushback against women. But he talks about delusion. Salute to Dr. Ryan Terabin. Let's continue.
Better living through psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is delusional women. So the other day, I had the privilege of sitting down with Sadia Khan on Soft White Underbelly. It was a long time coming. We had been texting for nearly 2 years before we were able to make that happen. In any case, after the talk, as I often do, I reviewed my performance in my mind. And I think I did a good enough job that day. But I also spent the next couple of days wishing I had responded differently to a couple of questions. The wit of the staircase, as the French say. So this episode is designed to supplement some of the words I said in that interview with respect to one issue in particular. At one point, Mark asked us both whether we thought that men or women were more delusional. And Sadia was pretty emphatic. She thought it was men who were more delusional than women. And she went on to talk about how a lot of her older, wealthy male clients actually believed that the young, pretty women who were dating them loved them for who they were and not their 70-year-old money. And yeah, I would say that's a form of delusion. And Sadia seems to see that a lot, which has a lot to do with the fact that she's working in Dubai at her particular price point, and I think she would freely concede that. In any case, I've mentioned on this channel that the most prevalent male fantasy is the belief that men can be loved for who they are and not for what they do or the value they provide to others. So definitely some alignment there. Now, in the interview, I did push back against this idea that men are more delusional than women, but I wish I had pushed back more forcefully. I've since given the question more thought, and I'm now convinced that women are actually far more delusional than men, especially in today's day and age. Yes, the delusion that Sadia mentioned is valid, but how many 70-year-old sugar daddies are out there dating 23-year-old gold diggers? Proportionally, this is a very small subsection of the population, which means that it's not a very common problem. On the other hand, the delusion that I'm going to lay out here affects the average woman. And so it is a much more prevalent and significant issue. The delusion of the average woman has been culturally reinforced in a number of ways over the past 20 years. All of the most popular content geared toward women that has been produced in the last 2 decades reinforces this delusion.
Exactly. And that's another reason why we have the panda bear community, because they understand the business model of it is that it pays to lie to women. Lying to women it pays so much money to lie to women. You can do it in your books. Steve Harvey, act like a woman, act like a man, think like a man, act like a lady, all these other things. I mean, it's designed really, it's like emotional prawn. Even Tyler Perry in his movies, all of this is designed, the whole system is designed to pander and cater to women's feelings and emotions, and it makes money. Let's continue on.
You see it in the Twilight series. You see it in the 50 Shades of Grey series and many, many others. The formula for all of these narratives is functionally the same. A rather normal and unassuming woman against all reason or expectation and through no real effort of her own, becomes the object of a handsome, wealthy, powerful, emotionally mysterious man's intense, obsessive desire. He is everything a woman could possibly want, and he not only simply lays it at her feet, he practically begs her to take it from him. For some reason, this top 0.00001% of a man has decided to forego all of the options that would be available to him and to focus exclusively on this average woman. And of course, this averageness is by design. The protagonist kind of has to be average so that the consumer, who is also average, can more easily project her identity onto the character and experience the fantasy. If the character were very, very beautiful, for instance, that is, if she was the kind of woman these types of men are interested in accessing in real life, it would be more difficult for the average reader to see herself in the protagonist. We also see this delusion in the kind of Yas Queen culture that has sprung up over the past 10 or 15 years. You know what I'm talking about. Girl, you are the prize, and don't let anyone tell you different. You deserve the world. If a man doesn't recognize your worth, that is, if he doesn't give you what you think you deserve, then you have to cut him loose and move on. A real man knows how to treat a queen, etc., etc. Now, what has happened is that the vast majority of women who, by definition, are average, now believe that they deserve a significantly above average man. And there is absolutely no basis in reality for this belief, which is what makes this a particularly female delusion. As I discuss at length in the book, relationships are formed when unequal goods of comparable value are exchanged. If the value proposition is too disparate, then no relationship is formed. And we know that in general, people tend to mate and date people of a comparable sexual marketplace value and attractiveness. This does not happen in reality. If you appreciate...
And it doesn't. But what he's going to talk about is what the women have failed to consider. It's like, let's say, for instance, Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick is a 10. He is a 10. The young lady that he's dating is 24 years old. Bill Belichick is a 0.0.0.0.0.0, whatever 0.0000% of a man. So in essence, he is a 10. Because very few men have the achievement, wealth, status, and power as Bill Belichick. So he can date a 24-year-old woman. In fact, it's a blessing that she's able to date Bill Belichick. It is. And that's what women like Sadia Khan doesn't understand. Men and women are not the same. It's not the same. So again, they try to make comparables between people of different genders where even the desires of both are totally different. But let's continue on.
You want in the sexual marketplace. Once you read The Value of Others, but even the relationships that Sadia was talking about might not be that. I mean, she's hot and he's rich.
Exactly.
So they might be playing on comparable power levels. The delusion would be to think that the fact that he's rich has nothing to do with why she's there, or the fact that she's hot has nothing to do with why he's there. The delusion that I'm talking about is a very serious problem because there are far, far more average women than there are soft-headed 70-year-old men. And many of these women might be foregoing satisfactory relationship opportunities in favor of a fantasy that has no basis in reality. And the longer they attach themselves to that fantasy, the less likely they're ever going to secure a satisfactory relationship in real life. And I get it. A perfectly decent, satisfactory relationship isn't very sexy or exciting. But wouldn't such a relationship be better than no relationship at all? I guess it's for each person individually to decide for him or herself, And that's the non-rhetorical question that is being asked every single day in the sexual marketplace. Is it better to be alone than to settle? And that presupposes another question: what does it mean to settle? Let's make this a bit more concrete. I'll give you a practical example of this delusion that I've personally encountered in my dating experience. A while back, I once went out with a woman who is probably situated between a 5 and a 6 in terms of her NSMV. So nothing terrible, but also nothing exceptional. Just an average young woman. And after our date, this woman texted me a report card in which she graded me on a number of dimensions. Like, you almost have to respect the nerve. And how did I score? Well, on a scale of 0 to 10, this woman awarded me a 6 for intelligence. So in her eyes, I was intellectually average. A 3 for physical attractiveness. So I'm about halfway between hideous and normal. And a 0 for emotional intelligence, which means, I don't know, I'm a robot or dead or something. 0, 3, 6, which if you average across the 3 dimensions makes me a 3 on average. Now, I understand that I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that is totally fine. But there is no conceivable universe in which I am objectively a 3 on a scale of 10. Like, there is just no fucking way. I was half a mind to simply dismiss this as bad female flirting, but the same woman, who was an average-looking woman in her 30s, went on to tell me that she was saving herself for a man who was an 8 in all 3 of those categories. It's like, fair enough, sweetheart, but you have to think, if I'm a 3, who do you think is going to be an 8? Like, who is that man? My feelings aren't hurt. I'm legitimately curious who this man is, and I'd like to shake his hand. A 3 and an 8 are like 4 standard deviations away from each other. In terms of intelligence, that's the difference between real intellectual disability, like the kind that would get you disqualified from the military, and intellectual giftedness. That is a huge contrast. Who is this guy? And where is she going to find him? And of course, on what reasonable basis can a 5 or a 6 expect to catch the attention of such a man, let alone enter into an enduring relationship with him? But that's the delusion, that an ordinary woman can secure a relationship with an extraordinary man, and that anything less isn't worth her time. The average woman wants the moon. But anyone in possession of the moon is not going to give it to an average woman. Again, this was not a 21-year-old model or an Instagram baddie with 1 million followers. This was a perfectly average woman. Nothing terrible, nothing wonderful. And this woman is not unusual. I bet that almost every man watching this video has personally dealt with this very issue in his own dating experience. In any case, that's how I wish I had responded to Sadia in that moment, if I had had my wits about me. Women are far more delusional than men these days, and that delusion is pricing them out of the sexual marketplace, which is directly contributing to the overall decline in relationships over the same timeline. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below.
So in essence, it's not only pricing them out of relationships, it is stunting development, arrested development, Peter Pan syndrome. Because what happens with individuals is what makes us developed as individuals, one is being forced to face our inadequacies as human beings. So we develop by being challenged. You get challenged mentally on your delusion, and then you develop and you overcome things. You have to deal in reality. To fix your problem, first you have to accept that there is a problem. And if you live in a society that's constantly pandering to you, and shifting responsibility to men, you can have a woman. That's why when they talk about these, when they shame men for dating women, younger women, what they fail to also realize is that many of the women in their 40s, 50s have the same have even maybe lesser mentality and mindsets than the younger women. They've literally frozen because they live in a gynocracy and they have not matured and developed mentally and psychologically. So they have the same mindset and mentality of a 22-year-old young lady, or actually it's worse because then their body has aged and they don't have the same value as their 21-year-old self, but they have a lot of the same delusion about their value, and their mindset is thinking in terms of that they were 21 years old and their options are the same, their values the same. So it's like stunted growth, arrested development. And so what happens is a lot of older guys would be like, man, I ain't trying to listen to this from no 45-year-old woman or no 50-year-old woman or no 40-year-old woman or no 35-year-old woman. Like, they just stuck. So a lot of women have become stuck, and the panda bear community doesn't help because all it does is facilitate more delusion and blame everything on men. So you end up with a bunch of women that are stuck, and it doesn't really benefit them or help anything in the dating relationship market. So this is where we're going. You know, we have a lot of stuck women, and it's kind of like, but this is the realities of the market out here, right? We're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of arrested development that's out here. You know, but I'm glad that Matt Walsh actually said something about it. And, you know, it is what it is, because what happens is they become idealistic in many regards. You know, and that's the fundamental problem. When you live in idealism as opposed to what's real out here in the real world. And that's where the failing comes, because what you see is what you get. We can have, see, the thing about our own wishes and wants, when it doesn't correlate to what's going on in society, we can have traditional values. We can respect marriage. We can respect all of these different things. But if the greater society, especially with women, don't see it that way, or if a guy is like, okay, you want a virtuous woman that you want to settle down in marriage with. But if that's only 5% of the population, how can all of these men be with 5% of the women? That's just a mathematical imbalance. It's just not going to work. He said women are children in adult body. The arrested development is terrible out here. Don't think if you're like a 50-year-old guy like me, I don't think that I'm getting a 50-year-old woman or a 45-year-old woman or a 40-year-old woman or a 35-year-old woman. I might be getting a woman that's, let's say if I'm talking to a woman that's 45, it might be a 45-year-old, a 21-year-old woman mind trapped in a 45-year-old woman's body. Is what guys are getting. So when a guy like Bill Belichick says, you know what? Instead of having a 24-year-old woman or a 24-year-old woman trapped in a 50-year-old woman's body, I might as well just go ahead and get me a 24-year-old woman who's in a 24-year-old woman's body. At least I won't have to take no Cialis. At least I'm like, okay. Or, if he's dealing in the gold digging tricking market, he'd rather have a 24-year-old gold digger than a 60-year-old Lisa Ray looking gold digger. I mean, it's just logic. Is sense equal. Not that men should be choosing that in essence, but that's Bill Belichick's logic. Why am I going to pay for depreciation? Why would I? If right now at this point in life, I got the Grim Reaper following me around. Why would I go for a 60-year-old gold digger as a 24-year-old gold digger? I'll take the 24-year-old gold digger because he really know with the women would only for Bill Belichick for the money at this point in time in life. What are you going to do? Pay all that money to look at wrinkles? Hell no. What? Man, at least he'll go out with a smile. Anyhow, that's just my point. It is what it is. But I want to really address this because what happens now is that we have a lot of religious conservatives, and what happens is they understand idealism versus what goes on in the real world. What's going on in the real world? The real world is what it is. Women are who they are, and that's just the way it is. Period. So, guys, make sure you guys hit the like button. Where we at? If you want to support the channel, please do. You can send a Cash App. You can send a super chat. But we're going to continue this conversation because this is really what we see going on in society today. Is that this Gen Z bashing is the most dysfunctional thing ever, considering that we don't talk much about the causation. We don't talk about the problem. And by not telling the truth, all you're doing is alienating the young men for being born into a system, into a situation. Instead of trying to talk to them, trying to help them. And this is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. They're only just regurgitating the same thing, which is just attacking the young men. Not attacking the system, not attacking their parents, not attacking the toxicity and the alienation that's going to be created from that. And again, if you see what happened in this election, from the bashing and beating up on young men, wait and see what will happen in the next one. If you follow the same mindset and mentality of the Democratic Party. That's why they're paying $20 million now, trying to figure out young men. Well, these conservatives don't learn from that shit. You think these young men are stupid? They will crush you at the polls. You keep disrespecting them, they're going to crush you at the polls. You're not trying to help them. You're not trying to show them any respect. All you got for them is shame and hatred and disgust and scolding. They're going to crush you at the polls. Keep messing with them. I'm not talking about, they're not constructive criticism, not offering any type of guidance or help, not offering any type of solution, just shame and disrespect. We're seeing what shame and disrespecting men created in this last election. Keep messing with men with this nonsense. These dudes are not responding to this shame in the way you want them to. If anything, it only increases and encourages their resolve to shut you down and not listen to you. You're not reaching them. You're not changing anything. All you're creating is repulsion. So you're wasting their time, man. It is what it is. But with that being said, man, salute to you, brothers. Appreciate you joining me. I'm out of here for the day, man. It's already 9:30. So peace and blessings to you guys. I'm out.